So a bit of a wieldy title, and I'll break that down. Here we go. So what I like to do with you in this session is I have 3 frameworks or models about transformative competencies, and then one about experiential learning, particularly in higher education. And then if we get to that, something about outdoor learning as well. But I want to spend most time on that framework on experiential learning and discuss that with you. So in between, I'll have questions for individual reflection to make sure that's as useful as possible to you when you leave the session, and some discussion. So don't have to look back at my background. It's just that, like, why am I talking about this? So I'm originally a teacher, and I've always been interested in, supporting people, or interest in the personal social development and growth of people in becoming whole, content individuals with their lives and become responsible citizens. So there's a lot of sustainability as well. And maybe that sounded a bit fluffy, but yeah, there's the sustainability. And fortunately by now there's some international frameworks that link to exactly that. And I did my PhD on something related to that. And like all my work revolves on that, and looked at aspects of leadership in that, on facilitation. I'm also a counselor. So, you know, lots that added to that. So the transformative competencies, there are some that are referred to repeatedly as challenges of the 21st century, like overpopulation, like the ecological crisis, health issues, poverty. So basically you can look at the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and you have them there. Plus things that we're living in uncertain times, like that, having to live with the unpredictability of what happens in a couple of years and how our lives will pan out. And that was even pre-pandemic, and now all the more. So these challenges have not been there before, and we have to change how we live. And the skill sets that schools and the longer education systems, so including higher education, have trained in people have not covered that. So there have been different international organizations, entities, and consortia that have looked at, well, what are those competencies that we need to successfully meet those challenges of the 21st century? And they have to be competencies that are transferable, in the sense that we're not looking at competencies that are specific to one profession or to one geographical region or to other demographic selection criteria, like for everybody. And work life, private life, citizenship, all demographics, like I said, and pretty much across the entire adult lifespan. And the quote there is from 2 of the key authors that wrote about the key competencies, and you might be familiar with that term. So competencies that we need for a successful life and well-functioning society. And that feeds in right with, like I said, my original and my continuous intention of becoming an educator. So one of those frameworks that looks at these competencies, and there's several, are the transformative competencies. So that term is by the OECD. Another one similar is transversal competencies, and that framework is by UNESCO. There are a few more. Some common denominators that they all have is that they all say we need teamwork and collaboration. We need to be able to reflect on our own values, attitudes, beliefs, actions. We need to have critical thinking, take on responsibility, and now more than ever, that is also in an environmental sustainability perspective. We need to be flexible. Like I said, uncertain times. We don't know what's going to happen in our individual lives as well as globally. So we need to be able to deal flexibly and be creative in problem solving and dealing with situations as they present. And there are a few more. Yeah, those are kind of the core ones that you find in all those frameworks that are out there. So this is what do we want people, all adults, basically everybody on this planet, competencies to have, so we can all live together, having happy and content personal lives, as well as peaceful societies, prosperous and living in a way that's sustainable for the planet as well. So that's a big target. And that's not new. Like I said, it's been mulled over for many years. And there are some approaches in education that can help towards that. And actually, I go one step back, because you might say, like, okay, that's nice, but what does that have to do with me? And so you're coming from different courses and programs, I understand. And probably likely these might not be part of the explicit learning outcomes of your specific course or your program. Yet I'd like to encourage you to think beyond that and think in that sustainable perspective of what can we do, every one of us in higher education, to contribute to the people that we work with, our learners, to develop these competencies to really make a difference. So this is the transformative competencies are the what do we want to achieve? And the how we can achieve that leads us to some learning and teaching approaches that have been widely evidenced to be successful in doing so. And there might be other ones, just they're not my expertise, so I don't speak about those. And I mainly want to talk about experiential learning, and then, like I said, hopefully touch on outdoor learning as well. So now I want to get interactive with you. So, sorry, what comes to mind when you hear or see the term experience? And think about this for a moment, and then just maybe write it into the chat. And I'll stop sharing the screen then for a second so I can see the chat. So what pops in your mind when you hear experience? Yeah, so I see already several that are hands-on, active, and that active means physical active, doing as well. The learning by doing is that classical slogan with it. I also see there was something about be personally involved. I love that. So thank you, Gunesh, for writing that, because that's something that I find important. The emotional engagement, and we actually had some discussions in team that I'll come to. Okay, any other thoughts? There was the practical engagement, the learning. Not all experience is valuable for learning, yet obviously in our context, that's what we're looking at. Okay, so I'll put this to the side and share my screen again. Now we've talked a bit about what an experience is, and there's some more factors. So then the question is, what's experiential learning? And you don't have to write that in the chat, because a lot of people have written about this and discussed this, and we could go in indefinite length about this. So I'll jump over that. And want to show you. So there are different kind of frameworks, or the literature talks about different topics that are key, different factors. And you've already mentioned some, like the practical work and emotional engagement and learning. What we've not found is a framework that looks at experiential learning, particularly in higher education context. So that's what we've presented, and we means the people that are listed up here, and then have the full list kind of at the end as acknowledgements. So we identified these 6 factors and then wanted to test them empirically. And these are in alphabetical order at the moment. So agency means that the learners have some say-so and some power over what they learn and how they learn it. Authenticity means that there's a real life connection, whether the needs, the problems that are addressed, the settings, there's the hands-on as well. There's something physical, something real that I can engage with. The continuity is based on Dewey's philosophy on experience and education, saying that what we learn now should build on what we've learned before and our experiences in the past, and should be directed at future applications. The emotional engagement, and in the team we did have a bit of discussion around that, because there seemed to be different cultural understandings of whether that is relevant or not. It's based on neurocognitive science, really, and knowing how we process and how we learn, and what comes into our brain gets an emotional tag. And particularly positive emotions are key carriers for learning. It's a very simple explanation to it. So we put that in and wanted to test it. reflection. So you might know that slogan, head, heart, and hand, as kind of experiential learning. The heart is that emotional part. The hand is that interactive, physical, multisensory bit. And the head is the bit that helps the learning. So it is something that we experience is something holistic, yet it can be on a just purely physical and emotional level. And to make it useful for the future, we need to process it and take apart and conceptualize what's been going on, what of that was useful, what we want to take forward. So all of that is the reflection. And finally, the support, because that so far could have just been any experience that we'll learn from. Yet if we want to put this as experiential education, like the pedagogy, there's something where we as educators have an intent in what we want to achieve. So we create safe learning environments and offer guidance. We select the settings and so forth. So we steer a bit to hopefully make those experiences happen so that our learners can learn from them. And so I think at that point, yeah. So we tested that framework in an empirical study at the University of Edinburgh and looked at 4 course elements that, as experts, we said they're absolutely experiential, and wanted to see if that framework fits with that. And there were courses in different disciplines, so in geoscience, in law, in community education, and in outdoor education. And we worked with the current students in that year and with past students with online surveys. The past students were up to, I think, like 15 years back, so quite a span to give us that perspective of hindsight. And we also did group interviews with all cohorts and then did a thematic analysis of the responses, as well as a statistical analysis to see the prevalence and any correlation between the factors, and triangulated those. And before I jump to that, I want to engage with you more through the Padlet. So some thoughts for reflection. If you please think of a course or a program you teach on. So thank you for responding to that first question. And it's really great to see that, the different courses you're on and, that there's some just there. So let me pull this over and we're going back to the presentation, and I'll just throw in those questions and you, come on. Here we go. Yeah, and we'll just move forward that way, and please just jump in and write something in the chat if you want. So apologies for that. We're getting a bit more directional, less interaction here. So what we found in terms of the authenticity was that in terms of the text, the content, the quality of the responses, as well as the statistical power, it was the strongest factor by far. So strongest factor means out of the 6 that we were looking at, authenticity was shown to have the strongest positive impact for learning and personal growth. And particularly that real life connection, students saw that as crucial for giving meaning. Like they said, well, it now makes sense what I'm learning because I see the practical applicability right there. And it also, and that's the part about continuity, particularly continuity future. So we had that as one. If you remember, we said current learning is supposed to build on previous learning and experience and direct it at future. Well, we saw that actually in the data that came out as 2 separate things, and that building on past experience and learning was helpful, but it wasn't as strong and as important as to make sure that what people learn right now, that they're clear what this is for. And particularly in connection to that authenticity, people said, it now makes sense what I'm learning. And I see I'm learning this. This is directly connected to what I'll be doing when I'm a practitioner once I've finished my degree. So it helps to make sense of this. It motivated people. I think they were more dedicated then to their learning, and yet it just aligned it. So questions you could ask there is to what degree do you have measures in place for participants to think about how this applies for the future, and how is the practical bits that they're doing in your course, is it clear that, how that aligns with their future practical profession? The next theme was agency. And again, that was connected to another one, I'll say that. So agency, as we said, means that people have some decision power over what they learn and how they learn. But we actually saw that that was really important to give them that ownership. So there was self-responsibility, which means they were engaged in it and got more out of it, and they were more motivated. And it also helped people make the learning and that course element work with their own lives and any commitment. So for example, there were some mature students who had caring responsibilities or who had to juggle studies and work, and where they had the opportunity to decide when they do this part and how many hours per day, or if they could work on the weekends, then that really helped them integrate that and have a good balance. And we also looked at where people indicated they would have liked more of something, and with the agency that came out strongly, they would have wished for more agency, where they felt like it was too directed what they had to do, and it would have helped them to be able, and they would have just liked it, in terms of the motivation and that sense of ownership, if they had more choice. And sometimes, if we think of how can we do this in practice, sometimes they can be little things. Like I said, that they can decide when they do this. And, with asynchronous learning, there's a lot of opportunities nowadays to do that. So I'm sure you do a lot of that. And it's really just thinking more of, hey, that's important. People said having that choice and ownership over learning really helped them to learn and grow from that. So maybe you can find other ideas of how they can be increased. So like I said, the agency was connected to, in this case, support. And in an interesting way that it's a counterbalance. So we saw that people said where there was too much support, they felt like there was spoon feeding, like everything was directed, they were told how to do it, and they weren't challenged enough, and they were just disengaged. Or they felt disempowered, where they are like, I can't handle this. Yeah. Well, on the other hand, where they felt there was too little support, they felt they were left alone, they were overwhelmed, they felt they couldn't manage the task requirements. So it's finding that balance of how much support is a sweet balance. However, it's really individual. How individuals have different needs in that. So that makes it tricky then for us as course organizers, because we can't just say, well, we give them as much support as possible because that's too much. Plus also that's our time, and that's maybe not possible. And so a tricky way maybe to do that is to give them the feeling, because a lot of students said, I didn't need the support, but I knew it was there if I ever needed it. And that was all, that made me feel supported enough. So we don't have to worry that we don't need to spoon feed everybody all the time. What is really helpful though for the student learning is to feel that they get the support when they do. So again, thinking about where can we drop in that message and say like, okay, and if you need anything, come here. And yes, maybe we can streamline that to certain hours of the week. Yet it's that message.
Sorry, but we have a question in our chat. Jenny asked that, does Turkey have the spoon feeding idiom? It relates to a parent feeding a baby, and the baby is not in control. The parent does all the work. The baby just has to ingest.
Yeah, so in spoon feeding is a term it comes from there, and it's also used in the sense that, yeah, you're doing everything, or mollycoddling, like pampering, like I do everything for you, and then people don't have to do anything, so they're not challenged. Is that what you mean? The audio isn't good, so I'm not sure I understand correctly. Is that what you meant?
Jenny, is it enough for you? Is it clear for you, Jenny? I couldn't get the answer. Maybe some of them cannot speak due to their arrangements.
Okay. Good. I see it, Jenny. Thank you.
Okay, I got the answer. Yes, it is clear stated.
Okay. So, So in terms of support, a lot of students said when they had the sense that there's a safety net, like they were challenged by dealing with real clients for the first time, but they knew that nothing could go wrong really because they had a supervisor there in the background who could come in and who could help them if they needed that. And just having that sense of support was all they needed. And then they could go out and really challenge themselves and try something new and get as much learning out of that as possible. Here we go. So reflection was actually not as strong a factor as we thought, yet it was an amplifier. So where people said there were opportunities for reflection that was particularly helpful where it was directed at that authenticity and continuity. So questions directed at how can you use this, or how could this be useful in your later employment? What of that was most impactful? And that helped them refine that and emphasize the continuity and authenticity. And also, so different modes of reflection were used in those courses, like journaling, like group discussions, feedback questions, one-to-one sessions where they had one supervisor and one student and asked some reflective questions. And people responded differently to those. So journaling, for example, some said it was amazing, the best thing ever. It was so helpful. And others said, like, no, journaling isn't their thing. So again, that from a program coordinator, whatever perspective, a course design perspective, that makes it difficult because there's no one reflection strategy that's best for all students. So it's more offering different formats and different opportunities for reflection. For example, and to ask them to do journaling and to offer occasional group discussions and potentially post some questions that they can think of on their own. So then it caters to different people and it's not a lot of input from our side, really. And we also saw that reflection is part of the support that we give, or the affording those opportunities for reflection. So, and finally, the emotional engagement, like I said, even within the team, we had some different views on that. It was really interesting. Statistically, it was the weakest factor, and it was actually the only one that had negative scores, meaning that some people said being emotionally engaged hindered my learning. However, when we looked at the text responses, it became clear that they were expressing stress for exactly two reasons. One was that they felt there was not enough flexibility and agency to balance that with their life commitments. So it's actually an agency issue. And the other one was that they were scared to go into that real life context. However, when we compared the responses from the current students with the past students, we saw that the past students said, yeah, oh, that was really scary, facing clients for the first time. However, that was so valuable because it so prepared me for what I'm doing now. So they revalued that, and that unpleasant feeling, that stress emotion actually is a positive challenge, and overcoming that nurtures competence and the sense of achievement. So we can't just say emotional engagement is bad. It needs more taking apart and more investigation. So, and we also saw that emotional engagement is viewed differently in different professions. So in the law course, it was seen as unprofessional to be emotionally engaged. While in the education courses, you do want to see some emotional engagement, in a professional way. Yet, it was just valued differently. So that was interesting to see as well. So to put all of this together, the different factors is you have the authenticity in the middle. That's the biggest thing, that making sure a course has as much real life connection, applicability, setting, questions, meeting people, dealing with the real life as possible. And that is directly linked to the continuity. So getting to that real life context that they will later work in really helps them to see what they're learning for and prepare for that future, for their actual profession then. The agency was good because it helped them see there were some real life actions that, because it was in a real life context, their actions and decisions had real impact. So that gave them that sense of agency and achievement, which was valuable. Emotionally, there was some stress connected to that. Oh, wow, what I do actually has an impact. That's scary. However, it gave them a sense of achievement and competence in working through that. And the support came all around that to make sure that they were in a safe environment, that nothing super terrible could happen to them, even when they maybe didn't act ideal with those clients in those situations. It was all safe and they felt protected and they could take as much learning out of that as possible. And the reflection kind of came in as a catalyst. And that's really this study and that framework. And the conclusions here, as I said, all 6 factors were relevant, just in different ways and to different degrees. The framework did hold across those different disciplines, and some recommendations for course and program design. And I just said those, make sure it's as practical and real life elements as possible and direct at the future. See if you can allow flexibility and individualization for the students, particularly mature and part-time students, to balance their studies with other commitments they might have. In terms of support, give them the message they're supported when they need that. And the reflection, different opportunities, different methods to apply to that. And that's it about this. So like I said, I only have a bit more about outdoor learning that's in the slides as well. So we can go to questions and comments and discuss those. So I'll stop here and see if we have any questions, comments.
So can you give one specific example of the activities, outdoor activities, on one of the courses you listed at the beginning?
Yeah. So the law course was a free legal advice clinic. So where real people like you and I would come and say, I have this issue with my landlord or with whatever, a contract, with anything really. And they come and they describe that. And then the students take notes and they go and do some backup research and then they give a recommendation. So it's legal advice with real people from the street. And they were doing the interview with the clients and they went into the research, and then they just had a supervisor who again sat in the other room and could step in, support them, and what they found out when they did their research, have a conversation with them. They wrote that letter, the supervisor helped them sign it off, and then they send that to those clients.
Okay, good. Can we count internships in, for example, this is tourism and hotel management department. Our students take 2 internships in real hotels, agencies. They are dealing with customers and their managers and their co-workers in the real settings. Can we count it as an example to what you suggest as?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Yeah, because the other ones, they were placements, they were all in the community. So specifically that, where we said like, these are so experiential, these course elements, and that's why I wanted to test the framework on them. So yes, placements, internships, community projects, all of that, yes. So then it would really, my kind of recommendation would be to say like, okay, so if the research shows that these factors are relevant in those ways, to then pick out the bits in addition to the fantastic things you're doing, to say like, can I maybe add this tiny bit to increase it even more? Or to pose questions to the students, because you're in a different cultural context as well. So maybe there's different, needs and views on that.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Okay, I got another question from Jenny on the chat. Okay, the question is that, could you ask specific examples of how educators build student agency?
I didn't quite hear that. Different questions of agency?
Okay. How educators build student agency? How we can build our students, learners' agency?
Yeah, by giving them more opportunities for choice, and that's a balance, because if you give them too much freedom, again, then they feel lost. So they need guidance. And my experience, also from working with younger people, is that it's a process. So first they get everything explained and in small steps and little challenges, and until they feel comfortable with, I'm at a university. This is how life works here. And then we say, okay, so now you've understood this. Now think about whether you want to do this or that, small choices. And then when they're comfortable with that, increase those. So that by the end of the studies, you can basically just throw them a theme and they live, they work through the processes and that themselves. So we, more specifically, we could say, if we take the internship that I think Jule suggested there, is we could say, okay, so we have some organizations that you could do that internship with. However, you can go and find your own if you want. So and then they do that. Or we say, okay, so you need to do 40 days in total, or so many hours, yet you can decide when you do them in this time frame. Or we can say the end product has to be a written text of so many words, or it can be a video, or it can be a podcast, whatever works for you. Or, so giving them options, to help them make this work for what they want to get out of it, for what interests them, for where their strengths lie, for, again, what other restricting factors they might have, and so forth.
Thanks to you. She thinks that's a great answer.
Okay, thank you. We have, is there another question?
I don't have from chat.
No. Then I'll quickly look at the outdoor learning just to, get that idea, because there's some connections. And you can just look at, share the screen. Okay. Oh, actually it's 20 past. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at that, and you can look at the slides. Oh yeah, here, the project team, just to acknowledge that was a team effort, that study. So outdoor learning, and that's not my work, that's based on Higgins and Nicol, colleagues of mine, and then there's been other iterations of this model here. A lot of people think of going outdoors for learning as in there has to be a canoe involved or climbing and all of that, and it really doesn't. And if you're interested in that, Scotland is actually leading in taking learning outdoors, taking the curriculum outdoors, primarily in primary and secondary education. Yeah, there's a lot of free literature there where they talk about how to take that curriculum, how to facilitate that. And so if you're interested, have a look online, or give me a shout and I can direct you towards it. So to think of taking learning outdoors, we can literally just step outside our classroom and use the grounds outside. Then we can think about how can we use the local neighborhood, like with placements. How can we get involved with the community that's around? Maybe even in a way that's good for the community. So not just for our learning, but that we can give something to the community and build relationships that then help our students already build professional networks and move on. And also in terms of sustainability, that help them feel more invested in the community to then build on acting on that in their later lives. Day trips, like an excursion, residentials, staying overnight, and really international field trips. And I'm really thinking about those, the one, what can we do immediately, just stepping outside our building and using that as grounds. Because there's a lot of value in taking learning outdoors. It changes the role of the teacher and the learner, because automatically there's different things to look at and different distractions, so challenges. So it's more a partnership of learning and lesson. I'm the knowledge holder and I tell you what you can learn, and then you just suck it up. So that changed more into a guiding process, which is actually super fun as well. It brings the curriculum alive, as we just said with the experiential parts. Taking learning outdoors is automatically basically experiential because of that interactiveness and the real life thing, and you're physically active. And and we know that being outdoors, particularly engaged with nature, is positive for health and well-being. And there's lots of amazing literature on that. And it also increases environmental awareness. So again, for that part of sustainability, where we have to change the way we live to save our planet, that is a direct effect of learning outdoors. There's some common resistances, and I'll actually just leave those for now, maybe, because there's some good literature that I directed you to here on how to do that, because people feel like, well, why should we take learning outdoors? It's actually really easy once you overcome some initial worries, maybe. So in terms of conclusions, rather questions, is it always better to take learning outdoors? Not necessarily. It's more using all available spaces and including in our thinking those outdoor spaces, particularly in respect to the experiential value that we talk more about with that framework. So rather than asking, like, why should I take my class outdoors, asking, why should I stay indoors? So yeah, go out and enjoy. And I have a whole bunch of sources, more than in the presentation, because like I said, there's some additional ones if you're interested that can be really helpful. Yeah. So back to questions, really. Or anything else you'd like to discuss? And I'll stop sharing again so I can see you. And I'm also happy to hear, like, if you totally and utterly disagree with me, I'm very happy with that, because it challenges my thinking. And so just throw it at me, please. And if you say, well, this is like old coffee, this is what I'm doing every day, then hooray, I applaud you, because that's what that would be amazing. So hopefully you can also bring the outdoors inside. Yes, to a degree. Yes. Yay, Jenny. Yeah, you can. Do you want to give an example?
Jenny have a problem with the speaker.
Oh, I see.
Never writing to chat.
Oh, I see. Okay. So yeah, to a degree, you can bring the outdoors indoors with images, with videos, with practical realia, so practical objects, or in terms of the wider thinking of the community, you can bring in guest speakers. So all of that is possible. In addition to that, being physically outdoors has those health and mental health, or mental well-being positive effects as well. So we get those for free. Even if you change nothing in what you do and you just take your lecture outdoors, then you already have those benefits or parts of those. So that it's just a consideration. And I know we haven't talked much about outdoor learning now. It's just something I wanted to touch on and open that perspective. So if you're interested, like I said, there's lots of fantastic literature there.
I think we don't have a question. Thank you, Jule. Thank you very much.
Okay. If, like I said, if there aren't any questions.
If you want to add something, we are here. If not, do you have any question? I don't think they don't say anything. So thank you very much, Jule. Okay.
Well, then, yeah, thank you too. And have a lovely day. And I'd love to hear how you get on with this. And
let's go out.
Let's go outdoors and enjoy it. And trying to fit that and balance that with the digital learning that's so dominant at the moment. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jule, for organizing this.
Thank you. Thank you.